Okay. Thank you. You look like you, Mr. Lyons, you look like you've got something more to say.
I've got a lot to say, Madam Chair, but I'll defer to others.
Thank you. Mr. Vaca? No? Okay. Thank you very much. You've given us much to think about. Our last panel will offer some thoughts from the field on the challenges of the current program and meeting the needs, as well as thoughts about the future of school facilities and the importance of the state role. Please welcome Mr. Eric Bakke from LA Unified, Mr. Robert Pierce from Elk Grove Unified, and Dr. Robert Hudson from Alpha Unified School Districts. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Well, you've heard the governor, the Department of Finance. You've heard LAO. You've heard the industry. You've and others speak. What do you think?
Wow.
Hold the line.
We have
the SAB. I'm sorry. Yes.
We have some prepared statements we wanted to, I think, go through fairly quickly, and I think through it, I think we'll be able to answer some of the issues, or maybe reinforce why we're concerned with some of the comments. So I'll just jump in real quick. First of all, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Eric Bakke with Los Angeles Unified School District. I think we've heard earlier today from Mr. Savage and Mr. Hancock that at the beginning, when SB 50 was created, there were a lot of challenges. I think that we were going through a transition. And I think you'd said it earlier, I think we're at a crossroads. You know, in our district, we have a chart that describes the complexity of the program, what you have to go through of the various steps. You know, I think we would just simply offer up that as we go through this process, we look at those steps. Are we adding value with each of these steps? Do we need to go through these steps? And I'll talk a little bit about that towards the end of my comments. But just generally speaking, I think, you know, some of the comments about the complexity of the program, it's true, but it doesn't mean that the program is flawed. It just means that's an area that we have to work on. There's obviously a lot of improvement. We would argue that this program has been extremely successful. We should look at this as an opportunity to embrace the program, take stock on what we've accomplished over the last 17 years. We should look at, you know, did the program meet its intended purposes? I think when SB 50 was created, I think at that point in time, there was significant growth, overcrowding, lack of capacity. And I think a lot of the attention and energy was placed on making sure that we had the appropriate facilities to house our kids. And I think that was what was necessary at that point in time. And I think today we have to sit and evaluate what's our purpose today. Is it still growth? I would argue, yeah, there's still some growth. Pocket areas throughout the state. I think, you know, we've heard comments before about declining enrollment, especially in an urban district like mine. But at the same time, there's need, and we can't just discount that. Through the longstanding partnership between the state, the developers, and school districts, schools throughout have been able to build energy-efficient K-12 schools, construct safe and healthy learning environments, expand much-needed play space, provide career tech opportunities, increase the number of charter schools throughout the state. Also partner with our communities to provide innovative joint use projects, to just name a few. Of course, like I said before, the program is not perfect, but it did allow for Los Angeles Unified to reach our goal. And I know that you're familiar with Los Angeles Unified, Senator. For us, our goal was to build traditional two-semester schools. For decades, we were living in multi-year-round campuses, overcrowding. To get us to a traditional two-semester school in our community was unheard of 20, 30 years ago. When we started our bond program, that was our intent, that was our goal. Remove involuntary busing, build neighborhood schools. I think Mr. Vincent touched on the need to talk about communities and talk about schools and talk about neighborhoods. Those are elements that our school district took as a priority and built our program around. And I think it's worked well. As a result, we were able to use programs like the Overcrowding Relief Grant Program, the New Construction Program, the Overcrowding Relief Grant Program, all of which allowed us to build 131 brand new schools. Or actually, I take it back, 130. Our last one will be built and opened in 2018. But what that did is allowed us to provide 180,000 brand new seats. That being said, I still have buildings that are over 50 years old. The average of our facilities is 52. That factors in all the new buildings that we built in the last 10 years. We have 2,000 portables on our campuses that are over 50 years old. The program just simply says you need to modernize these. We would argue that at some point I need to replace them. I can't keep them forever. And unfortunately, if I look at my history, I think I was just sharing this with Mr. Pierce. I actually have one that's over 100 years old. Hopefully it's still not being occupied. I'll have to check on that. But the point is that to replace those portables, I would have to provide, if loaded at 24:1, that's 48,000 new seats to replace those portables. So you can call that new construction, you call that modernization, you call it replacement, but it's a need. The state incentivized school districts to load their school sites. They required 20% portables to be located on your sites. They incentivized school districts to use MTRE. Now we're here today. We've changed those policies because we realized those policies were bad, but today we're now paying the price for that. We can't just ignore that. We have to make sure that we maintain that investment. Let me give you one example. I forget which one of the members raised it earlier. We talked about replacement of facilities. We in Los Angeles Unified call it a comprehensive modernization. It's a nice way of saying this school is not quite working what we need to do. Jefferson High School is one. It's nearly 100 years old, built in 1917. Over the years, it's been severely impacted with overcrowding and the need to operate on a multi-year-round calendar. When we looked at that site, we looked at its facility condition index, we looked at the seismic risk factors, we evaluated the size of its core facilities. Does it have the right gymnasium, multi-purpose room? Is it too small for the size and the capacity that it's serving today? We looked at this play space. Too many portables are on this campus. It just wasn't lined up. Buildings weren't in the right place to create safety. So we want to make sure this school is healthy, safe, clean environment to provide the education that we're asking. You know, the state's asking of us and we are asking to deliver. And so we just want to make sure that when we look at our schools, sometimes it no longer makes sense to invest modernization dollars in these schools. I mean, I think we've heard the adage, you know, lipstick on a pig. I think it's getting too costly to continue to do that in the state. And I think to continue to say that that's the type of program we should have, I think is doing a disservice to the kids in our state. I think it was mentioned earlier about the cost of maintaining these facilities. For us, you know, addressing a type of facility like this eliminates the amount of time and energy a school site administrator must spend on those failing facilities. We're able to spend more resources on the education, not on the maintenance. And that's a significant impact. I'm not quite sure today exactly what our deferred maintenance budget was, but I know it's been flexed over the years. Used to be 3% was the requirement, now it's 0. It's supposed to come back to 3% next year. But I mean, anything that we're spending, even at 3% today, considering the condition of our facilities and how long they've been overcrowded, is nowhere going to be sufficient. It just isn't. And so what we want to try to do is make sure that whatever program we come up with supports that. It's been said before that the education is like a three-legged stool, and I would say facilities obviously is one of those legs in supporting that child. But if we don't begin developing a long-term strategy that focuses on providing every child with a clean and healthy learning environment, all the energy spent on those instructional programs will be wasted. They'll be distracted by the facilities, too noisy, not clean, mold, whatever you want. It's just not going to be a conducive environment to support the education that we're making our kids, you know, go through, whether it be Common Core, whether it be any program. We want to make sure that those facilities are appropriate. I do want to close, just to touch base. We were asked to answer a few questions, and I will try to attempt to do that. I don't think 5 minutes is going to be enough. I think we probably need maybe another day or two, to be quite honest with you. How the current program can be improved or restructured, or what are the specific program changes? I would just simply offer that we probably, in terms of simplicity, you know, and looking at my chart that kind of resembles something out of Chutes and Ladders, I would just say that, and I think you've heard it before, simplicity. Look at the value-added steps, take a look at each of the agencies that are involved in this process and determine how are they helping us build schools. You know, evaluate if we have duplicity of roles and responsibilities. Is it necessary that you go through a particular agency, or does the requirements within that agency really help us build the schools that we need to build? Should we say that if we're going to push more on the locals, then maybe the local decision-making should be there, and the state should just help support schools in addressing their facility needs? And it's a little subtle, but it's a significant twist in how we operate today. The program should deliver safe and adequate schools that support our educational needs in a most cost-effective manner. Like Jefferson, that particular school, the program right now would encourage me to build a brand new school somewhere else. It wouldn't allow me to tear down the existing school because that capacity has already been realized. So it would say you use modernization dollars, which effectively is about 40 cents to the dollar when you look at new construction. But what I'm talking about when I look at a comprehensive modernization is a full replacement. I'm moving buildings to make sure that they're in the right place. I'm making sure that the school site is safe. I'm making sure that the labs are the appropriate size. I'm not trying to squeeze a science lab in a small little 960 square foot building just because that's all I have. So these are the things that we need to make sure that we incentivize. If I were to have gone out and built a brand new site somewhere else, I would have had land costs, cleanup costs, eminent domain costs. But we should encourage districts to look at sites that are already in our inventory and see how we can repurpose and reutilize those sites. We should incentivize that kind of opportunity. So we just encourage them. Joint use projects, I think it was said before about community. The program, I think it was a great program. In LA, we've done a number of joint use projects working with our community members, but the biggest challenge was that some of the requirements, if I'm not mistaken, was that there was a 10% match on the capital side. Well, many of our partners don't have that kind of capital to contribute to a construction project. Where the benefit lies is in providing operational savings for the school district. I have a local bond. I will build the facility if you cover the operational costs, whether it be the heating and the lighting, whatnot. That's where some of our partners can really help, and that's where I think we should encourage those kind of programs. Funding should be stable, reliable, and consistent. I think we've heard this over and over again, and I can't disagree with that. The bonds have certainly been a way in which we can provide that stability. I'm a little worried, and I think so are my colleagues sitting up here next to me when we hear that funding for school facilities will come out of the general fund. I think if you look at the last 5 years, I think that should be enough to scare anyone away from that type of a proposal. There's no continuity in looking at what kind of funding you get from the state in terms of a general fund model. We can't plan 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, know exactly what we're going to be able to do. We just can't do it. So for us to build, we need to start planning today for next year and the year after and 5 years down the road. But not knowing if there'll be funding there when it's time to actually sign those contracts, it would just stop everything. So I know these guys have some things to say. I'll just leave it there. In terms of need, I just want to just make a quick comment about the LEO's proposal. The concept that we would reduce, and maybe I'm still trying to understand the proposal, but if we would reduce our opportunity to receive future state funding based on past receipt of state funding, our state funding was primarily on new construction. Mm-hmm. Our need going forward is only on modernization. So what we're getting is penalized for building new schools to get kids out of year-round overcrowded schools and preventing our what we call our legacy schools, schools that have been around 30, 40, 50, 100 years. We're penalizing them from getting the same equity in terms of resources that our new schools received. So I understand, I like the idea that folks are thinking outside the box. I think that's great. But I think we need to spend a lot more time at evaluating what the implications of these kind of decisions are, and I think that's one of them. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Pierce?
Thank you, Senator Liu, members of the committee. My name is Rob Pierce. I am the Associate Superintendent for Facilities and Planning with Elk Grove Unified School District. I've served in a similar capacity as well as a consultant for about the last 20 years. So candidly, I consider myself to be a facilities geek. And I was fortunate enough to cut my teeth in this industry back when the late Senator Green was working with so many other members in the Senate and the Assembly on SB 50. And you've heard a lot about SB 50 today, and I'll toy with the notion I keep the bill in my briefcase as a good luck charm. And I have to tell you, it is a successful program. It's done a tremendous amount of wonderful things for local school districts, and more importantly, and I haven't heard this word a lot today, children. The reason that I'm involved in education is because I had a phenomenal educational elementary, middle school, and high school career. I had great teachers, and I had adequate facilities. They weren't Taj Mahals, but they foot the bill and they did the need for me. So I haven't strayed from that course, and I've been involved for a number of years. You've heard from a number of people, including Mr. Savage and Mr. Hancock, who have a lot more history in the program than I do. So you've heard a lot about what SB 50 began as and what it's become. And believe it or not, even with the complexities in this chart that Mr. Bakke has, it is much more streamlined and it is much more efficient to what we had prior to SB 50. So what I'd caution all of us moving forward, blowing up that program will take a tremendous amount of time. We have to be smart about it. We need an interim plan if we're going to go down that path. But I think a lot of the things and the negativities that you've heard about the program aren't a result of where it began. It began as a needs-based, eligibility-based funding program where districts received a full and final apportionment. They were rewarded for efficiencies and savings. And it's become more of a, and I hate to be this frank with it, but it's become viewed as more of a burden on the state as opposed to a service for students and a service for California schools. And we've layered upon layered new requirements, new program changes, and I really think what we've done since 1998 is at the core of what you hear a lot of the complaining about. And I caution my colleagues, you know, in some regard, we've met the enemy and it's us. We've done such a good job of being critical about the program that now we're toying with the notion of blowing it up. And so if we do pause the program, I think it's important, and the LAO's proposal speaks to an interim measure that will at least be a stopgap until we derive a final solution, if in fact that's where we head. So I won't get into a lot of the details, but there are a couple of points that have come up today that I feel the need to address. First and foremost, the funding model built within Prop 98 or somehow being part of the local control funding formula, which is a great tool. But from the practitioner's vantage and from the school district's perspective, it's just not attainable and it's not realistic at all. And to have our facilities and our facility needs compete with what's happening in the classroom year in and year out, whether it's class sizes or instructional programs, because that's what will happen. If the dollars are flexed to that degree within Prop 98, they most likely won't end up going towards facilities. And if they do, it'll be at the chagrin of what's happening in the classroom, unless we're talking about increasing the Prop 98 guarantee substantially. So I just want to share that with the group. In terms of the Prop 39 success, we've heard a lot about Proposition 39 and its overwhelming success. I would just share with the group, Proposition 39, at least from my perspective, was a tool, thankfully, that the legislature put forward and allowed school districts to have a new method to pass local bonds, not to fully fund projects, but to finally compete for state matching funds. So in a prior life, I was in Fairfield Sassoon Unified. We had 9 dramatic failures of previous bond measures. And so we were that school district that Senator Block was speaking to earlier, where our facilities were in dire need, but we didn't have that match to compete, and we also couldn't qualify for financial hardship. Had it not been for Prop 39, we wouldn't have passed that bond measure in 2002 that allowed us to compete for state matching funds. So Prop 39 was never intended to be the end-all, cure-all for 100% local match facility projects. It was so that we could, in fact, go out and attain our state funding. As far as the LA's proposal, I applaud it. I've read it 3 times since I received it yesterday. It is a big effort, and the 2 gentlemen who spoke with you came out and spent good quality time in our district, and we shared with them on the ground what our facilities are like and the problems that we have. I appreciate the fact that it suggests the state continues its critical role in facility funding, although the source is unknown, and I think that has to be answered before we can look at the proposal as a realistic tool. And I also applaud the notion that the interim tool would be required until a program is finally agreed upon. But there's some huge concerns with it, and there's also some huge questions that I have from a practitioner's vantage that I would be happy to answer for you. But really quickly, in terms of Elk Grove, so to kind of bring this home for you, for school districts, both Elk Grove and suburban districts in general, So you've heard a lot today about declining enrollment. I don't know what that means because we have not experienced it even through the recession. Flat at best, but now we're growing again. And we still have all these modernization needs that you hear about. We were unified in 1959, and we have a lot of facilities that were built prior to that. So we have modernization needs, but we also have tremendous, tremendous growth needs in our district. So I've heard other people in these halls mention that there's only a couple of year-round schools still in the state of California. We still have 13 multi-track year-round schools. During the recession, we took 15 schools off of multi-track year-round to save money and to put kids in classrooms. We have schools now that aren't multi-track year-round with over 1,000 students on that campus each and every day, and just trying to feed those students, as you can imagine, is a difficult task at best. And we're most likely going to have to convert some of those 15, if not all 15, back to a multi-track year-round calendar if state funding is not in the foreseeable future. We literally don't have a means to build the new schools that we'll need. And I will add that we're already at 24-1. So the local control funding formula and the LCAP, as you well know, requires us to be at 24-1 in TK through 3. By 2021, I believe, we're already there. And so that creates, it's a great thing for students and a great thing for education, but it creates facility demands that the LCAP puts upon us. In the bigger picture, we're working on our updated master plan now. We have identified the need for 54 additional schools in our district in the coming future. That's 40 elementary schools, 7 middle schools, and 7 high schools. Those are schools that are already mapped and part of already approved and actively planned new development projects. We're a very large district. People think we're just the city of Elk Grove, but we're a huge unincorporated portion of the county of Sacramento. In addition, our master plan is also addressing our needs assessment. And so just to keep the facilities that we have currently in our inventory in the condition that they're in now over the next 10 years, the price tag is just south of $500 million. So in terms of new construction, in today's dollars, easily $2 billion in new schools, $500 million just to keep what we have today in the shape that it's in. And that's not even addressing additional facilities and what we would like to think of technology upgrades to meet the 21st century needs of our students. So the problem's only going to worsen over time. It's going to become exponential. Right now under Prop 39, we could float a bond under the requirements and restrictions of Prop 39 for about $500 million. So you can quickly do the math and see that that's not going to do it for us. And again, Prop 39 has been successful. I think part of the success are the caps that are built within Prop 39. So as we toy with the notion of increasing the tax amount from $60 per 100,000 of assessed value to something north of that, I think you'll also see the success won't be as high. Taxpayers are frugal in this day and age. They're comfortable with those tax amounts. So those successes will dwindle if those caps are raised and districts try to take advantage of that. So I know I'm speaking quickly and I had a lot to share, but out of courtesy for your time today, I think I'll leave it at that and then answer any questions that you might have.